A lot of our rainfall has since ended across the area, but the leftover clouds still hanging around. Looking out toward downtown, mostly cloudy. Temperature 85 degrees. Did have a little bit of measurable rain at Kenner, not much. Had a brief downpour in Metairie and Old Jefferson. Didn't last for very long, but was heavy enough and lasted long enough for a brief flash flood warning to be issued. Thankfully, didn't have any reports of flooded businesses or homes. 93 was our high today, just above the average. And again, just really a little more than a trace of rain at Kenner. Morning low was 79. Expect 70s again overnight tonight. We're in the 80s, but low 90s in areas that did not see the rainfall. And even with the rain, doesn't really happen until later in the afternoon. Those temperatures are still able to get into the low 90s, although we don't stay there for as long as the rainfall does kind of help to cool the temperatures. But our rain coverage was a little bit less than we saw yesterday. Dew points mid upper 70s, low 80s. Muggy's not going anywhere anytime soon. Most of our rain, as I mentioned, has since ended across the metro area, and we have finally started to see a bit of a break in all of the rain. Now, this is all thanks to, we still have a more southerly flow keeping that rainfall and ample moisture in place. And the upper high really isn't playing as much of a role as I thought it would in preventing a lot of the rain coverage. Now, we certainly saw a little bit less than we did yesterday, but still enough shower and thunderstorm development, which is more of our typical pattern. There's actually a little disturbance in the Gulf, fairly weak, but the model's indicating as that kind of moves toward us during the day tomorrow, it may once again help to trigger a little bit more rain during the afternoon and early evening time frame. So rain coverage tomorrow during the day, probably at about 40%, and then maybe similar rain chances and temperatures as we go through the rest of the week. I'd rather take boring and no changes to our forecast in the summertime. Our local expert forecast taking us up to Robert, where temperatures will be in the low mid 90s. Check at the tropics. We still do not have a named storm. Hurricane hunters and satellite data did not show a closed circulation at the surface. As a matter of fact, looking at radar, there have been several little spins here and there. So this is still not yet a well-developed tropical system. It is certainly a very efficient rainmaker, and there is definitely a broad circulation, but again, you need that closed circulation at the surface. Without it, it does not meet the definition of a named tropical storm. Convection is developing very near the center, although you saw it was a little more impressive earlier. Looks like that has waned a bit. So it's going to have a tough time. Not only the environmental factors, dry air and wind shear, which I'll show you in a moment. Pretty soon as we get into tomorrow, it is going to be moving over very mountainous Hispaniola. Those high peaks of the mountains will help to disrupt that circulation, and the expectation is this will weaken back down to a depression, and then once kind of between Florida and Cuba, likely to start increasing in strength again, and then once into the eastern Gulf, this may be where we see it at its strongest point. Again, that is still a little ways off. However, the forecast track has not really changed. The forecast envelope of main models that the Hurricane Center uses for forecasting have been very consistent and in very close agreement. The only difference we really saw in the models is that the GFS has started to trend a little bit closer to Florida once again. We'll likely see these little jogs from the models, but I like to see that consistency. Here's the thinking in the track forecast. Big ridge of high pressure that extends from the Atlantic across the southeast United States is keeping the storm moving in that general west-northwesterly direction. Once we get into the weekend, we're going to see an upper trough and a break in the ridge. That is going to allow the storm to make a turn more toward the north. And again, wherever it makes that turn will be about where we should see a landfall. And the models have been at least indicating kind of that Bend area of Florida to maybe Apalachicola. So certainly still keeping us on the drier side. There is likely going to be a little bit of a wiggle here and there, but I will say computer models this season have been doing a far better job than they have in the past. Ridge of high pressure will keep our rain chances at a lower 30-40% for the next couple of days. That upper trough that's going to create the weakness in the ridge will also create a slightly better chance for some showers here by the end of the weekend and early next week.